What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Struggle to Strength podcast, your source for real life application on how to turn your struggles into strengths in all things mind, muscle, and money.
Josh, do you ever feel like shit?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, every now and then.
Have you ever felt like a steaming pile of hot garbage?
I for sure used to feel like a steaming pile of hot garbage a lot more often than I do now. I think most people feel like a steaming pile of hot garbage from time to time. But I think like you can develop strategies and implement tools to help you feel less like a steaming pile of hot garbage. Like maybe not binge drinking 30 rack of beer on a Friday night and then again on a Saturday night.
That's probably a good idea.
It's probably a good idea. You can also implement strategies to help you feel better in a lot of different aspects of your life. So the problem that I think we have in the world today is that people just don't feel good, like physically, mentally, financially, spiritually, in their relationships, in their work, in their fulfillment across the board. There's a solution to that. So today on the podcast, we talked to Fletcher Ellingson, who put himself through a year-long rejection experiment, which was awesome to hear about. And it makes me want to do it really bad. But he did this to figure out why he felt stuck and how he could break free from financial overwhelm and persistent worry and like actually live the life that he wants and spend time doing what he loves. Our question to you guys, the listeners, do you ever feel like shit? Well, if you do, or if you just know that you can feel better, and let's face it, we can always feel better, stay tuned, because in this episode, we have the privilege of speaking with Mr. Fletcher Ellingson, who's a speaker, a coach, and creator of the practice of feeling good in business and in life. He's studied with some of the best minds in the personal development industry. He's helped hundreds of entrepreneurs embrace these principles to feel better. And as a result, they've been able to produce outstanding outcomes in their health, their wealth, and their relationships. If you're listening to this podcast, it's because you want to get better. So if you want to get better, stay tuned, because we're going to dive deep with Fletcher and you can learn how to implement the strategies that he teaches so that you can start to feel better today. We'll see you inside. I think first off, I'm curious to learn how you got to where you are now. Like what happened in your life that made you take this path?
Yeah. Shoot. I'll try to nutshell that for you because it's a long story, but believe it or not, it started like in third or fourth grade. I went to a school assembly and there was a guy there who was a motivational speaker. And he was handing out stickers at the end of the assembly. So here's third grade or fourth grade Fletcher, getting his sticker at the end as he's exiting the gymnasium. And I put that sticker on my bed frame. And it was the bed I slept in for, a lot of years. And it said, start your day with PMA, positive mental attitude, expect something wonderful to happen. I saw that every single day. And somehow that impacted my psychology, because then in grade school, I began reading personal development books. I was reading Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking when I was in grade school. Because I remember my dad coming out on the front stoop, and I was reading a book, and he was like, "Hey, Fletch, what you reading?" I said, "The Power of Positive Thinking." He just kind of stopped. He's like, "By Norman Vincent Peale?" I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh man, you are an odd kid." But it kind of just set me on this trajectory. And don't get me wrong, I had lots of ups and downs and got into plenty of trouble as a kid. But I always had this base of this optimistic base, and that kind of kept me in this conversation over the years. And to bring it full circle, is it 3 years or 4 years ago? I ended up finding that speaker who was at my third grade presentation. I didn't even know his name, but I just started going on Facebook and saying, "Hey, does anybody remember this sticker?" Because I had a picture of this sticker on my phone that I took when I cleared out my mom's house. And I ended up talking to him and ended up interviewing him on my show. And so that was so cool. He was like thrilled because how many years had passed? Like 44 years had passed. And now he's getting a call from somebody. He's like, oh my gosh, I impacted the trajectory of this kid, right?
Yeah.
So pretty cool.
That is really cool. What a wild story, especially from such a young age. I can only imagine your dad being like, power of positive thinking. You know?
Yeah.
I was reading like Captain Underpants. You know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you know, to understand that from such a young age, I think is incredibly valuable, because most people they have to unlearn the bad habits, that negative thinking, that negative self-talk. They have to unlearn that. If we can teach people from a young age and impact them from a young age, like your speaker did, then you never have to unlearn things. It's so much easier to just start doing something from the beginning than it is to completely change the way your mind works.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of ultimately why I have branded myself the way I branded it and created this curriculum called The Practice of Feeling Good, right? So, because it's not easy. It's because we've got all this programming, right? So we do have to unlearn it and reprogram. We have to set new programming up in our minds and practice. It is a practice. It's not one and done, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, and that goes for everything, not just like positive thinking, but how we react to things, how we respond to things,
Totally.
how we respond to loss and wins, and like both positive and negative. That's something that I've been doing myself a lot, is trying to reprogram some of those things that I want to improve upon. So I'm really excited to hear your story, not only from where you started to where you are now, but, we've talked about this rejection experiment. And I think one of the things that people struggle with dealing with is rejection, loss, failure, things of that nature, and having a positive outlook on it and finding the lesson. So what was this experiment that you did? Why did you do it? And what was the outcome?
Yeah. So, in my previous career, I was in sales, and I was realizing that while I was very successful, and other people looking in saw my success and like, oh my gosh, how are you doing all that? But what I knew inside was that I'm still limiting myself. I may be selling more than these people, but inside, I feel limited. And there are still frequent times when I'm coming up against myself, when I'm coming up against fear. And so I drilled down. It's like, what am I fearful of? And I was like, oh God, there it is. I'm afraid of getting rejected. And then I saw some guy do a talk that really impacted me. And he talked about his rejection experiment. And I was just blown away by this concept. So I said, and I thought, I've got to do it. So one of the things in my curriculum, The Practice of Feeling Good, is all about being radical. If you want radical results, we have to take radical actions. Now, when I say radical, a radical shift could just be that 2 millimeter shift, right? I mean, it really could be something very small, but it's radical in the sense that it sets you on a new trajectory, or it interrupts your thinking patterns, and it allows for a different outcome. That's radical, but it's going to require a different action. And so as I began thinking about this, I made a commitment. I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this for a year. And one of the beautiful things about making a commitment, it's the only time that you can actually experience your personal power is when you take responsibility for a commitment that you have made. You do not feel powerful any other time in your life except for when you're taking responsibility for the commitments. Now, you can feel a lot of other things. You can feel good, happy, grateful, but I'm talking about empowered. If we want to feel empowered, the direct path to feeling empowered is to make a commitment and then take responsibility for that commitment. And so again, this is part of being radical, because a lot of people make commitments and then they don't take responsibility for them. And how do they feel? They feel disempowered, right? Because what's missing is that the taking the responsibility. It's just like, I know, Josh, you're in the fitness industry. Is this accurate for what happens in the fitness industry?
Oh yeah. Yeah, everyone. I mean, look at January 1st every year. Everyone, January 1st makes a commitment. By January 17th, it's National Quitters Day because people don't take responsibility or they don't take the right approach.
Yes, exactly. So that taking the responsibility for the commitment that we've made, that's like a magic wand for empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so I decided to do this and I got into action. And I got to tell you guys, this was one of the scariest thing I've ever done by a long shot. So, and I'll tell you the rules, okay? So the rules were, number one, I had the experiment had to make me unsettled. It had to bring up a sense of fear. It had to bring up, it had to activate the cortisol. It had to activate all those non-feel-good chemicals. Number two, I couldn't do it to impress anybody. Like I couldn't say to my buddy, "Hey, watch, I'm going to go do a rejection experiment."
Yeah.
I had to do it by myself. And number three, I couldn't tell the person why I was doing it. So I couldn't say, "Hey, excuse me, I'm doing this rejection experiment, and I'd like to ask you." No, it had to be unprompted. They had to be not in the know. And so I began doing these experiments. The first one, and Josh and Travis, as you guys hear some of these, some of them may feel like, well, what's the big deal about that? But different things scare different people, right?
Totally.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah. So the first one that I did was, it was at Bank of America. And where I live, we got this Bank of America building. And on the side of the building, there's this old rusty sign, metal sign. And it says, it's got the emblem for a fallout shelter. So, and as you go through bigger cities, you'll see these, like on the side of a building, fallout shelter below. And I've always seen them, but I didn't. And then I realized this is the only one in our small town of 5,000 people. And I thought, I'm curious about that. Like, is it still there? Is there still a fallout shelter in my town? And
What is a fallout shelter?
There? A fallout shelter is in the event of a nuclear war.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So right. So like if you
Interesting timing to be talking about.
Yeah, I know. Right? So if you go into a big city, you'll see the radioactive sign, and it'll say fallout shelter. And they're designed to allow people in the event of worst case scenario go around there, and they're supposed to be have bunks and food and all sorts of medicine.
Wow.
And you just kind of wait it out. So anyway, so I thought, is that still there? So I went up to the teller and I said, she said, "Hey, can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm not here to make any withdrawals today. I was just wondering if I could get a tour of the fallout shelter." And then there was a pause. And this is the same thing that happens almost every single time when I make these ridiculous requests. There's a pause, and they say, and she says, "Excuse me," or they'll say, "Can you repeat that?" Or "What did you say?" And I'll say, "Yeah, I was wondering if I could take a tour of the fallout shelter." And so why did this unsettle me? It's because the banks are always like, you don't go beyond this line.
Right.
You don't get to see what's back here. Right. And so I was a little out of my comfort zone and making this request. And she said, "The fallout shelter?" She's like, "No one's ever asked to see the fallout shelter." And I said, "Yeah, so there is one still?" She was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, can I see it?" She said, "I have to talk to my manager." So she brings the manager over and she says, "Hey, Fletcher." She knows me from being in there all the time. So I said, "Hey, I was wondering if I could see the fallout shelter." She pauses and then she starts laughing. She's like, "Oh my gosh, no one has ever asked to see the fallout shelter." And she said, "I'm about to take my lunch break. Can you come back in an hour?" I said, "Sure." So I went down. So I came back in an hour, and she's like, "Come on back." And we went into the sacred area of the bank tellers and down the stairs, and brought me into the fallout shelter where there were still bunk beds that are decades old, boxes of food rations that are decades old. And the coolest thing though was, and she let me take them out of the box. There were two brand new, I mean, old, decades old, but never been used, bright yellow Geiger counters. So I got a picture of myself down in the fallout shelter with these 2 Geiger counters, right? It was super cool. So that was my first one, but they got steadily way more nervy, scary for me. So one of them was when I was is it okay to share another one?
Oh yeah. Keep these coming.
All right. So I'll tell you about the one that I chickened out on. I was in Starbucks and I was like, I got to do a rejection experiment today because I had to make myself do them. In fact, with my coach.
Yeah, that's what I was curious of. Like, what were the rules around how many did you have to do?
Yeah, exactly. So my goal was to do, I think it was like 2 or 3 a week.
Okay.
And there were times I had to get stuck because I was like, because here's what would happen. As soon as your mind identifies a rejection experiment, oh man, you should hear the internal monologue in your mind, right?
I can only imagine.
It like starts trying to talk you out of it. Oh, that's not a good one. That's not a good one. Oh, don't do that. Oh, that's a waste of time. Oh, you don't want to inconvenience people. Or that's kind of rude. I mean, your mind just starts going off trying to talk you out of it. And so I was in the coffee line and I said, I got to do one. And I said, I'm going to ask a stranger to have a staring contest with me. So I got my drink and I was kind of surveying the room. There weren't that many people in there, so it was pretty easy. So I identified a person sitting down, and then it kicked in. The adrenaline kicked in because I was going to have to like stare into a stranger's eyes, right? I mean, we have all sorts of taboos about looking in people's eyes. How long do you stare into a person's eyes before looking away, right? There's all these unspoken rules about it. So my adrenaline started kicking in, my heart rate went up, and I started just shaking a little bit. I was feeling really scared about this. I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. So walked over there. Right before I got to the person, I turned and walked right out the door that was right next to them. I got in my car and I drove away.
Fled the scene.
Yes, I fled the scene, and I got to the stop sign, and I was just like, "Dang it, Fletcher! Come on! This is why you need to go do this. You're simply going to ask somebody to look into your eyes. What are you afraid of? You're afraid of looking like a fool, afraid of like upsetting somebody, afraid of breaking that taboo." So I took a deep breath because that's usually what could help me manage my state is taking some deep breaths, drove around the block, walked into the store, walked over to that person, sat down on a little chair right next to them, and I was clearly in their space. And they looked up and I said, "Hey, my name is Fletcher. I was wondering if you would be willing to have a staring contest with me. The first person to blink loses." Same thing, the response, "Excuse me? Yeah, my name is Fletcher. I was wondering if you'd have a staring contest with me. First person to blink loses." And they thought about it and they said, "Okay, let's do it." Right. So that one was where I chickened out, but I went back and did it. And that was a big triumph for me. Now, I'll tell you one more because this one was crazy.
Okay.
I was in LA. I was on my morning walk through a neighborhood, and up on there was a house to my left, and there was a sloped driveway going up to their house, and the garage door was open, and inside the garage I could see a ping pong table. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, "Oh no, oh no, don't do this one," because I love ping pong. I love bracket sports, and I was like, "But don't do that one. Just keep walking." And I was like, "No, too late. I got to do it." And this one was particularly tricky because I had to cross somebody's physical property boundary, right? Very personal. So I walked up to the door, knock, 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 heard the dog barking, some muffled voices in the background. A lady opens the door and she says, "Hi, can I help you?" I said, "Yeah." Hi. I said, "Hi, my name is Fletcher. I'm from Washington State. You don't know me. but I'm just walking through the neighborhood here. I saw you guys have a ping pong table. I was wondering if anybody would want to play a game of ping pong with me this morning. Same thing. What? I went through the spiel again. Do I know you? Nope. I'm from Washington State, just visiting my in-laws about a mile down the road. And you want to play ping pong? Yeah. She says, just a second. She closes the door and I hear muffled voices. A few seconds later, the door opens again. It's the husband. Can I help you? I said, I went through the whole spiel. And he said, you just want to play ping pong? Yep, that's all. We don't know you? Nope, you don't know me. I'm from Washington State. Just a second. Shuts the door. More conversation behind the closed door. A few seconds later, the door opens up. It's their teenage son. My dad said, you want to play ping pong? I said, yeah. Are you open for to a game of ping pong? And he said, sure, let's go. So we went out and played a couple games of ping pong. I'm sure he whipped me and then I was on my way, right? So, but that one was so scary, right? Because I'm crossing all these physical, personal boundaries. But what I discovered in this rejection experiment, you guys, was really set me free in a big way. Because what I realized is that most people say yes, even to the most ridiculous and audacious requests. And so first of all, that's a huge and powerful thing for a person in sales to understand, right? And or their first no is not their final answer. They may need more clarification. You may need to repeat yourself. And if they say no, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting the offer. Mm-hmm. All right. So it allowed me to really separate myself from my offer.
That was just such a big bomb that you just dropped. Like, that's a clip right there.
Yeah.
It was really powerful. And the things that people said yes to, I went down to Mexico with my wife. I ended up leading a seminar in Mazatlan, Mexico, to 50 agents who sold timeshares at this 5-star resort, simply because I asked to. They didn't know me. I don't speak Spanish. There was no reason that they would. That was my rejection experiment when I was on vacation. And so one of the mornings there, I ended up speaking to, he was so impressed. He was like, I'm going to, in fact, make it required that all 50 of my agents show up. Then they found out my wife was a physician, and they asked us back another morning on our vacation to talk about health and well-being. So this is how I got my TV show. My wife and I have had a regional television show for the past 3 years. How did I get it? A rejection experiment. I walked in and asked for it. I mean, wow. What's possible when we get out of our comfort zone and make requests? I'm telling you, it's exciting.
Yeah. And this is so crazy because one of the things that I'm thinking when you're saying this is like, this goes along with kind of like a saying that, people will say, which is like, oh, if you don't ask, you'll, I don't know what the saying is, but you don't get what you don't ask for, that exactly. Type of thing. Exactly. People like say stuff like that, but it's really interesting that you got all these good things because you took something that probably a lot of people say and don't actually really think about, and you made an actionable plan. Like, no, fuck that. I understand that you don't ask you don't get what you don't ask for, but also I'm still scared of it. You know what I mean? Yes. So I'm going to go get rejected 3 times a week. Yes. It wasn't like, I'm just going to keep telling myself this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I need to here's my problem. I need to do something about this. I'm going to go get rejected 3 times a week for this amount of time. Boom. That's literally, like the key to life. I feel like.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And Travis,
understanding that.
Yes. And Travis, what you're, and the interesting thing about what you just said reminded me of something. Like, my goal was to get rejected.
Yeah.
My goal was to get a no. So I would make audacious requests of people, right? And I most of the time I went in thinking, this is definitely going to be a no. And then they'd say yes, right?
That's wild.
I'm excited to start doing this. And I'm like, as you're telling these stories, I'm thinking of friends that I've had in my life who they're just a little bit more like this than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there are people who are a little bit more likely to just kind of like see what they can get away with, and like understand that a lot of people were just willing to do, audacious, like ridiculous things. I have a friend, Travis knows him, Dan, if you're listening to this podcast. Oh, yeah. Dan has a thing where if he's out and we're out at a bar or if we're at dinner, he likes to ask people if he can have some of their food. And so he'll walk by, we're at a bar, and he'll just stop by. He's like, hey, can I have a couple French fries? And almost everyone is like, you want some of my fries? And he's like, yeah, just a couple. Can I have a couple fries? And they're like, sure. Yeah.
I love it.
So it reminds me of Dan. And every now and then people say no. He asked for like a mozzarella stick one time, and the guy was like, no, I have 3. Like, but I love this concept of, obviously this is something that we're afraid of. This is something that I deal with as well. And I'm getting excited about asking people to do things that like sound ridiculous.
Yes.
So what I'm curious about is like, out of the point was to get rejected and say no. And you said when they say no, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting the offer. I think that's a really valuable thing to remember here is, anytime we're getting rejected, it's not us, it's the offer that we're presenting. How do you go about dealing with that rejection after it happens? Because that's what you were afraid of in the first place, right?
Yes. Yeah. So what I realized, because in our mind would have us believe that rejection equals death.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what our mind is like. Don't do that. Oh my God, if they say no, you will probably die. I mean, that's what our mind is telling us. And what I realized that it's not the case. And what I realized that, here's the big takeaway for me. What's at the core of fear? At the core of fear is simply a story. That is it. And it's always future based. It's never about what's happening right now in the moment. The fear that we experience, the fear that I experienced in this rejection experiment was always future based. It's what if they say no? Mm-hmm. It's what if something bad happens? It's what if I don't make the cut, right? So at the core of fear is simply a story. So now I understand. Anytime I'm feeling fearful, there's a story going on in my head. And now I get to pay attention to the story. Is it accurate or is it not accurate? Does the story serve me or does it not serve me? And then here's the other thing that you mentioned you wanted to talk about. Now we have the opportunity to be courageous. You see, the gift of fear is the opportunity to be courageous. You cannot be courageous without fear being present. Like, it's impossible to be courageous unless first you are fearful. Mm-hmm. Now, some people listening to this might think, no, Fletcher, you can be, I've seen badass people. They're like, they don't get afraid of anything. No, that's confidence.
Yeah.
Right. That's confidence. Everybody has something they're afraid of. And in that moment is the opportunity to be courageous. Now, likewise, just as I said, at the core of fear is a story. So too, then, is the same for courage. At the core of courage is simply another story. And that story is, I can do it. The story is, if I do it, I'll get this other thing, or I'll make a difference, right? So the act of courage is really the act of envisioning a different story that stands in contrast to the story of fear. So the story of courage might be like, I will make the team. I will get the job. I can save my marriage. whatever that the thing is, it's in direct opposition to the fear story. But we have to be intentional about developing the story. Otherwise, some people just get stuck in fear, and they have zero access to courage because they don't understand that courage is simply developing another story. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I think that there's the courage and the telling yourself that story, I think, comes around in a number of different ways. And I'm curious, especially from your point of view after doing like a rejection experiment, what do you think is maybe the best way to get there, or how do you think most people get there? What I'm thinking is like there's like the confidence to do something can come from like repetition. So I've asked this a bunch of times. I've been rejected a bunch of times. I understand like how to do it. I've done it a lot of different times. So like I kind of have the confidence. I understand how to tell myself. There's like failure, which is another, huge teacher, which is, okay, I got rejected. I failed. That now I've learned like, it's not that bad, or this is how I do it better next time, that sort of thing. And then there's like kind of natural skill and ability. There are definitely, there are some people who seem at least to be more naturally confident about things.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What do you think is really like going on, or what's kind of like, because in my life experience, for me personally, it's just repetition. Like if I do something a bunch of times, the first time I ever like kissed a girl, I was like a mess. You know what I mean? It was pathetic. But like later I was like, that was something that I was good at. I had a lot of confidence in that area of my life. And that's just like repetition. And you can see that there's lots of different I have kind of like a similar, no, I didn't do like a rejection experiment, but I had a couple sales jobs that were really tough with like 20 cold calls a day, type of thing. That's not like a crazy amount, but we were doing like 20 cold calls a day, and a ton of them were rejection. People literally yelling at me, telling me to fuck off. And at first it was horrible, and then like, I don't know, a year later or whatever, I think of it as I had a really good system. Like I knew what to say and how to kind of like, get to the right person without being rejected along the way. But really that just comes from like repetition. You know what I'm saying? Like I put the reps in. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious, like, what do you think is like the best way of getting better? Cause a lot of people are really nervous to try things, or to like make a change. And it's like, what should they focus on? Is it just putting in reps? Is it failure, or are they doomed because they don't have the natural ability?
Yeah. Well, so I love, you bring up a really good point. Like doing the reps, that breeds competency, right? So, and competency breeds confidence, right? So when we're talking, what we're talking about is like doing something where there's no level of confidence there, like, or you might be confident they're going to say no, right? So it really comes down to practice. And again, this goes back to why my curriculum is called the practice of feeling good. It's not about just feeling happy. In fact, I rarely use the term happy, but the practice of feeling good means confident, competent, open, willing, safe, secure, all those types of things. So it comes down, but it requires practice. And so to answer your question, Travis, we have to begin to practice. We have to begin practicing, and we have to be willing to practice. Start small, make a request of your partner. And you don't have to do it like a rejection experiment. You can say, hey, I'm a big fan of letting my friends and family know that I'm about to begin practicing a new behavior. Like I let the people in my life know, like, hey, you guys, I really want to become more proficient at this, or I want to really have this way of being in my life show up more powerfully. And so I let them know. And so with my wife, she's an easy person to practice with. I'll say, hey, I have a concern, or hey, I want to try. I'm thinking about trying this thing, or I'm thinking about whatever it is. And I'll tell her, like, I have a request. That sometimes we simply lack the sentence structure because we're not practiced at it. So things that we're not very practiced at is saying, hey, Josh, I have a concern. Hey, Travis, I have a request. I feel a little bit sheepish about asking it, or I feel a little uncomfortable asking it, but I have a request, right? So I'm framing it, couching it, but I'm practicing it. Practice where it feels safe at first, and then step out of your comfort zone, and you'll be able to do it in other venues as well.
I think that right there, that you just what you just said can bring down the anxiety of having difficult conversations and asking for things that are uncomfortable tenfold, just by prefacing it with, hey, I'm concerned. Hey, something that my girlfriend and I have been doing a little bit is like, if I'm a little bit nervous about something, hey, I'm nervous. Can I ask you a question? Hey, I have a concern. Can I ask you a question? And like instantly both parties are on the same page.
Yeah.
It makes such a big difference.
Yeah. It kind of brings you both present, right? You're like,
yeah.
Like, oh, he's got a concern. Oh, that's a trigger word. Oh, I should pay attention, right? I'm going to be present with you. Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier to have that conversation. And, especially if you're used to just letting your concerns or what's bothering you out. And it can, on the other side of that can feel kind of like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't ready to have this conversation from the person that you're talking to. So I think that is a incredibly valuable tool that I didn't learn for a long time. And I don't think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people, I don't know why that is. Maybe people are afraid of admitting that they have a concern, or that they're afraid of requesting things. So they don't state it that way, and they kind of dance around it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that goes directly back into the whole rejection thing. Their fear, like, what if they say no to my request? Right. So, and to bring this full circle, Travis, because your question was really good, like, how do we start doing this? The other thing that I practice a lot is my story of how I see life. And that is, I am resourceful, capable, and flexible. Like, that's how, one of the ways I define myself. I'm resourceful, capable, and flexible. Look, if I'm resourceful, capable, and flexible, I can do anything. But nothing in that affirmation says I have to know all the answers or even have experience. But I'm resourceful. I'll find people who can have the answers, or that can mentor me, train me, model it for me, right? I can look it up online. I'm capable. I look back to all the evidence in my life where I established that I have been capable. I know I'm capable, and I'm flexible, So, and then the second story overarching story that I have for my life, Travis, is that life is always working out for me. It's always working out for my greatest evolvement. It's always working out for my greatest evolution. And so life has always worked out for me. It is right now, in this very moment. I'm alive. I'm talking with you guys. And so I look back, I look to the present, and therefore I know that life will continue to work out for my greatest evolution. Now, sometimes things happen and it doesn't look like life is working out, doesn't feel like it's working out, doesn't even sound like it's working out, but I know it's working out for my greatest evolution, and all will be revealed. So practicing that way of thinking is super helpful. It makes making the big request more palatable, more doable, more accessible.
Yeah, I think that's valuable, and especially as people are going through especially hard times, the thing that kind of stands out to me as you're saying these words is like, we're going through hard times. You've made it this far. Like, you've made it through this far. Everything's worked out. Everything's been fine this far. There's no reason to believe that it's not going to be, but we're still afraid that it might be. And, a lot of what we're talking about today goes back to fear of rejection, fear of the future, fear of possibilities, fear of the unknown. And you talk about that fear can be a gift. So I'm curious to hear your take on this. How is fear a gift? Like how can we utilize that as a superpower?
Yeah. So because now I understand that anytime that I'm feeling fearful, the opportunity for courage is also there at the same time. It's like fear and courage travel in a pair. Where fear goes, courage goes as well. But sometimes we're like this. We're like tunnel vision, right? And all we see is the fear. If we just did this, we would say, oh, shit, I didn't even see courage was right there too. Oh, hey, courage, right on, right? So it becomes, once we expand our vision, we're like, oh, fear, then it means courage is right there as well. Mm-hmm. And I love knowing that fear and courage travel together. Mm-hmm. And but it's a story, and so it's the opportunity. The gift of fear is the ability to step into a courageous story. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. I keep on thinking of, I don't know why my brain keeps going back to Courage the Cowardly Dog, a cartoon I used to watch when I was a kid. and Courage was always getting into situations where he was just terrified, really terrifying situations, but courage was always there. And I don't know why I keep on going back to this cartoon, but where there is fear, there is courage. And, I like the idea of going out of your way to find opportunities, to experiment, to try to face your fears, to go through rejection, and to continue to grow as an individual. And, you'll probably agree with this. It's like once you start that process of trying to overcome your fears, trying to better yourself, trying to face your fears quite literally, and improve at like the base, most cellular level of these like frameworks that we've learned our entire lives, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so what I'm thinking is, you're going through this process and eventually it's going to get overwhelming. And, we talk about, we all have breakdowns every now and then. And leading up to that breakdown is a lot of that overwhelm. So if I'm like biting off more than I can chew and I'm doing all these things and I'm failing and getting rejected and I'm always fearful and I'm having trouble seeing courage and I'm having trouble finding the positive in everything that I'm doing, how do we overcome that? So you talk about the anatomy of a breakdown.
Yeah.
How do we navigate that?
Yeah, great question. So this is such a wonderful discussion. You're going to appreciate this. There are only three things that cause a breakdown, period. No more. Only three. Now, some people listening to this will be like, oh, well, you don't know my life, Fletcher. I've got a lot of breakdowns. There's been more than three things. But really, when we break it down, which we're going to, you'll see that there are really only three. And the first thing that causes a breakdown or an upset, right? A breakdown or an upset is a thwarted intention. That's number one. Like you've got this intention. Like a couple of years ago, we were going to go to Maui. And then this thing called the pandemic happened. I had an intention to go to Maui. Had plane tickets, everything. We're going to go. And then the pandemic happened. I had an intention that was thwarted. And so there was an upset. It wasn't a big one, but we're just using it as an easy example. My plan, my vacation was thwarted, which resulted in an upset, right? Or a breakdown. All right, so that's number one. Anytime that you have an intention that gets thwarted, right? Maybe you plan a wonderful meal for your partner and you're all excited, right? You're like, oh, this is gonna make her evening. I bought the flowers. I got her favorite kind of wine. I got the music playing, right? You're like, this is gonna be really nice. And then she doesn't show up. And there's no text, there's no call. 20 minutes goes by, 30, 45 minutes. And finally a text comes in. It's like, hey babe, sorry, I've been in a meeting. It was an emergency. I'm not going to be actually home for another hour and a half. Right? You had this intention, or you had this intention, and it was thwarted. Mm-hmm. And so it ends. That's a breakdown, right? So does that make sense? Yes or no?
Totally.
Oh yeah, very, much.
All right. So the next thing that creates upset is an undelivered or miscommunication. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, how frequent are those? Frequent. All the time.
Oh yeah.
Right? Yeah. Especially if you're like in a relationship, like a marriage relationship or a significant other. Oh man, those miscommunications can happen so easily, right? Mm-hmm. And it could be as easy as like, hey, I thought we were supposed to meet at 6:00. Oh, I thought you said 6:30. When someone's up in arms about it. Oh God, he's disrespecting me again. Oh, there he goes, running late again. Screw it. So there's a miscommunication, or there's an undelivered communication, meaning that we've been withholding communication. And this frequently sounds like this. Hey babe, what's wrong? Nothing. Are you sure? Yeah. Nothing wrong. What's happening is there's an undelivered communication. Clearly something's wrong, right? And it's not being delivered. I'm withholding. And so that can be, that can also, right? So we've got a thwarted intention and miscommunication and undelivered communication. And the third one is we've got an unmet expectation. Yeah. Well, I expected that you would, get me the good sneakers that I wanted for Christmas. I clearly said it on here, the brand, the size, and I got pink ones, So there's an unmet expectation. Obviously, that's a silly example, but it could be, I expect to get a raise. I expect to get the promotion. I expect to be included in that decision, right? I expect that you're going to clean up the dog poop outside because you said that you were going to do that. We have these expectations, and then when they are not met, it results in an upset or a breakdown.
I have a example of all three, which is something that I was talking to someone about recently. So intention. So scenario, someone's in like a corporate job, for instance, and they've been working there for a couple of years, and they're like, they need to move up in the company or go somewhere else. Intention is like, let's say there's a management position open. I'm going to get that because I'm clearly the one that's supposed to get it. Non-communication. Well, I never told anybody that. I never communicated to the head of our department that I want that position.
Yes.
And then what was the third one that you just said?
Expectation.
Yeah. So expectation, and then the non-communication, and then thwarted intention is I expected this to happen. I never communicated it to anyone. So they gave it to the person that did communicate.
Yes. Perfect example.
That's not
of
fair.
All three too.
Yeah. That's not fair. I'm the one who's supposed to get it. It's so obvious, right?
Yes.
But who is it obvious to,
Exactly. And I love that example because the undelivered communication is really clear in that example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You didn't communicate it.
Yeah.
You were holding it, you were holding it close to your vest and just hoping that they were going to be able to
work
read your
hard,
mind.
they'll notice, and then they'll give it to me. And plus I'm the one who I'm the clearer option. Well, it's like, that's not why things happen for people.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they might not have known that you wanted the promotion.
Right. Exactly.
Like, you're good at your job right now. You have to communicate that, but maybe it was a fear of rejection. Maybe they need a rejection experiment.
Yeah.
So
that's a perfect example, Travis. Thanks for sharing that. Because you're right. It ticks all three boxes. But here's the real takeaway. Because we have minor upsets on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. It could be like spilling your cup of coffee on your document. You're suddenly upset. All right. So when we understand this is why we're getting upset, we have greater access to responding in a way that serves us better. If we don't understand why we're upset, we're not processing. We're not processing it, right? So in a manner that makes sense to us. And so people will sometimes wake up in a funk, and they'll be like, "Hey, how are you doing today?" "I don't know, man. I was in a funk." What's going on?" "I don't know. I just woke up that way." So it's like, no, there was actually something that happened, and we just haven't been able to understand, like, oh, I had an unmet expectation, or a thwarted intention, or a undelivered communication. So then now you suddenly have access to working through the upset powerfully, instead of being being the victim of it.
This is almost just like an awareness thing.
Totally.
If you're upset, or if you're experiencing a breakdown, okay, well, why? And without getting trivial, I imagine, about why, is it one of these three things? Which one of these three things is it, or multiple in Travis's situation? And yeah, I feel as though that can help, sort of remove you. I think, a lot of what we talk about in therapy and in the other guests that we've had on is sort of dissociating from the event and being made aware of just like the core level of what's bothered you.
Yeah, exactly. And notice that in all of these, in the anatomy of an upset, you'll notice it's not necessarily about the other person. Like, something happened for sure, but we're not saying they did this to me. What we're saying is, I had an expectation. I had an intention, right? I didn't deliver a communication. It's radical responsibility. And anytime we can take the responsibility, we have way more access to creating a breakthrough, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that another really big one that I want to touch on, I want to make sure people understand this, is, if you're in a conversation with someone who is upset about something, even if it's something that you did, yes, there is some responsibility on your part. But what you're saying is, like, there's also one of these three things that triggered that upset. It's not that you did this. Right. It's a combination of these things where, oh, I really expected this to happen. No, you didn't do it, but we can share that.
Yes. Yeah. Really good. You can see, like, how powerful this can be in relationship.
Yeah.
Like, now we can go to our spouse or our business colleague and say, if there's a conflict, you're like, hey, wait a second. What did you have some sort of expectation that wasn't met? Or was there an intention that was thwarted here? Let's get to it. We suddenly have the vocabulary and understanding to articulate it in a new way that expedites our journey to resolution and creating something more powerful.
Yes. Yep. The vocabulary is a huge piece there. And it's awareness, it's vocabulary, it's simplicity.
Yes.
A lot of times, especially in relationships, we see these small miscommunications and these thwarted intentions, and these unmet expectations. They start off as just that, and then they become trivial in, trying to find this resolution, when really that's all it was. That's all it was. So if we can dial back down and stay at the core level and the core foundation of exactly what caused the upset, and not get trivial about who did what and how this was, and, it just kind of grows and grows and grows. Come back to the core. I failed to meet an expectation that you had. That's on me.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah.
And now how quickly can we clean that up? Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, wow. Mm-hmm. And also for your listeners, also, I just want to say, like, hey, look, the good news about breakdowns is that if you're in a breakdown, the good news is that there's a breakthrough nearby. The only time you can have a breakthrough is if there has been a breakdown. And how good does a breakthrough feel, by the way? I mean, feels like
amazing,
euphoric, right?
Oh my God, it feels amazing. I like, full transparency. My girlfriend and I, we just had a huge one just the other day where we call it a pattern. We were like in the middle of a pattern and then like massive breakthrough. And we were like, we don't have to do this. This is amazing. Instantly, everything was better. It was unbelievable. And it came down to awareness. And unbeknownst to us, one of these three things that caused an upset. And in this case, it was a miscommunication. We're like, this is amazing. We don't have to do this. It's done. I hope everyone can experience that at some point.
I love it. I love it.
And it all came down to awareness and creating simplicity and understanding at the core what the issue was.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you've used the word awareness several times, and it made me remember like that's what life is. Life is simply the sum of what you are aware, right?
Yeah.
Life is awareness. I mean, again, I'll use this. If I'm looking through a little small pinhole, my awareness is very restricted. My view on life, my experience of life is going to be like that tiny little pinhole. And then as soon as I take that tube away and I'm looking around in 360 degrees, my awareness, my life just got a lot bigger.
Awareness and perspective, really.
Yes.
Responsibility. Which we also talked about, and we've talked about that a lot on the podcast too, but just taking responsibility. Like if you're aware, you have perspective and you take responsibility for everything, like things get a lot better.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's horrible having that feeling that like, oh, these horrible things are happening to me. Bad things happen in threes, fuck off.
Yeah. The responsibility component is great. That's actually one of the core tenets in our business is responsibility. Like not everything's our fault, but everything is our responsibility.
I love it.
Understand it, hold yourself responsible and accountable and take care of it. And everything that you've taught us today makes that so much easier. Because I feel like a lot of times, if we don't have this fundamental understanding of what's causing an upset or what we're afraid of or how we can be courageous, if we don't have these fundamental understandings and if we don't have the vocabulary, like you said, we can kind of feel like there's so many things that we have to work through to get through this. And it almost feels like all of the possible scenarios, all of the possible problems.
Did Josh
and
freeze
issues.
for you too?
Yeah.
Did I freeze? I can hear you guys. That's weird. Can you guys hear me now? Shit. God damn it. Oh, do I have you back?
Yeah,
you're back.
You're back now.
That was so weird. Okay. Sorry about that. James, we're going to rope back in here.
Yeah. Edit that out, James.
Edit that out, James. James is our producer.
Right on.
But I feel as though a lot of times when we're trying to work through something and we have that heightened level of that hyper aroused state, we're a little bit anxious and we're thinking a little bit, sometimes irrationally or logically because we're emotional about things, especially in these situations, it can feel as though all of the possible problems and the things that we're fighting against can almost like get put into a blender and they break up into a million pieces. They become really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so coming back to the core foundation, the fundamental like beginning of what caused this with what you've taught us, with the vocabulary, with the three things that cause a breakdown, with what we fear, with everything that we talked about today, coming back to that core foundation takes everything out of the blender. It makes it so much easier to focus on. Similar to how when you feel anxious about, you have so much to do today. I have so much to do today. Well, if you write it down, you probably only have a couple things to do today.
Right.
You know? So this, I think if we can train ourselves to think more fundamentally and at more of like a core foundational level, then I think we can all become better, more effective humans. We can become better communicators. We can become better partners. We can become better business owners, and we can become better for ourselves. So, before we got on this conversation, you were talking about how valuable the conversation that we had with Chase was. And I was hoping that this was going to be just as, and I can tell you that it did not disappoint. I feel so much more ready to take on life now that we have had this conversation.
I love it.
Yes. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure.
Yeah. So this has been absolutely valuable. We're just at about an hour, and I would really love to hear more about the other things that we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about quite a few things. And so maybe we'll have to have you back on to learn more from you. Yeah, but man, Fletcher, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this knowledge with us and sharing your stories. It's been incredibly valuable. I know that I for sure am going to want to keep in touch with you and follow along. I know our listeners are too. So before we part ways, I'd love to give you the opportunity to kind of like plug yourself, where we can find you and what you've got going on.
Yeah, you bet. Best way to get in touch with me is through my website, FletcherEllingson.com, or thepracticeoffeelinggood.com. Either one. Email Fletcher@FletcherEllingson.com. Look me up on Facebook and come along with the journey if you want. Just type in Fletcher Ellingson and you'll find me. But those are the best ways. And if you want to hop on a discovery call for coaching, or want to find out about some of my seminars, just get in touch with me. Got a question, just get in touch with me.
Amazing, man. I'm definitely going to give you a follow and stay in touch. And I'm absolutely going to start doing my own rejection experiment, because I think that would be valuable. Yeah. I think, I don't know, Travis, I don't know if you're in with me on this, but I just want to see, like, I just want to see what it's like. And I think that, like you talked about, Travis, is we both had jobs fresh out of college where we got told no, and we got told to fuck off, and people were really mean to us in a lot of ways. And it does change you. And I think since then, yes, I'm still in sales in some capacity. And yes, we run our own businesses and we're taking risks, but getting back to, again, like that core foundation of just like being comfortable with rejection, I think will make me a better person for sure. It'll make me more capable and more confident for sure.
Well, I want to, if you guys end up doing any of them, please let me know. I want to follow along with that. That's so fun. But the other cool thing about it, I'm gonna let my dog out. He's asking to go out. But the other cool thing about it is, come on, Jack. The other cool thing is that you really become a master asker. Mm-hmm. And for me, like, to play the game that I'm playing in my life, I need to be a master asker. Mm-hmm. I need to be able to make requests of people, even if they don't feel comfortable. But the other cool thing is, when you become a master asker, is cool stuff starts happening. Like, why not just ask for the upgrade at the hotel or at the rental car or on the airplane? So my wife and I do this all the time. We get so many upgrades for free just because we simply ask. They'll be like, well, let me check on that. Well, actually, yeah, we could give you that convertible. It literally happened. We had a economy car down in California, and my wife just said, they said, oh, it looks like we're out of that. We'll have to bump you up to a midsize. And my wife just said, well, could you just put us into a convertible? And he laughed. And then he said, well, actually, let me check on that. And sure enough, we drove away in a convertible for the price of an economy car. I mean, just like,
that's awesome.
Like, we just start making requests because it just doesn't matter if they say no. Right.
Yeah.
A little bonus, final bonus tip for everyone who's still listening on this. Any any major credit card company will waive fees if you just call and ask. So if you're ever stressed out about late fees or fees of any sort, it's not even like it's like basically their policy. If you just call and ask, they will remove like any fees. Maybe if you're like their most degenerate customer, they won't. But that's like a kind of like not so well known secret that is that's like a real thing. So if you're ever stressed out about late fees, you just call and ask, and they waive them. So you get what you asked for.
Right on.
It's just about asking, man. So I like, I am for sure going to do this. I'm for sure going to do a rejection experiment. I'm extremely confident about this. I'm really excited. So I appreciate you just introducing us to this. And to everyone who's listening, I would love to have just like a crew of rejection experimenters. So if anybody wants to do this with us, like reach out to us on Instagram and reach out to Fletcher and like, let's get a crew of people just like learning to ask for stuff and see what happens. But man, Fletcher, again, thank you so much. This has been incredibly valuable. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And, you know, to those who are still listening, give Fletcher a follow. If you do your own rejection experiment, let him know, let us know, keep us included on it. And thank you very much for continuing to listen this far. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Struggle to Strength podcast. We will see y'all next week.